On the morning of October 3rd, the first light of dawn filtered through the foggy windows of the fast food restaurant, The Late Bite, casting a faint, cold glow over the kitchen. The air in the restaurant still carried the lingering smell of old cooking oil and the breath of the night, with everything still drowned in silence. Katie, the morning shift worker, was the first to enter the kitchen. She didn't sense anything unusual at first, but there was a chill in the air, an unsettling feeling that seemed to linger. Her footsteps didn't have the lightness they usually did. She knew something wasn't right. When the kitchen door opened, the sight before her made her stop for a few seconds. She saw Caleb, the young man she had always seen smiling when his shift ended, now lying face down on the floor, his body motionless. His hand was tightly gripping a broken cup, the sharp shards reflecting the pale light from outside. Fresh blood was spreading across the kitchen floor, painting a gruesome picture that no one could have prepared themselves for. The smell of blood, the stench of death, seemed to fill the entire space. Katie stepped closer, unable to take her eyes off Caleb's lifeless body. The wounds on his body couldn't have been caused by an accident. The bruises, the deep cuts, could not be the result of mere carelessness. Something worse, something darker, was waiting to be uncovered. She shivered slightly, but tried to stay calm. She knelt down, looking at the bloodstains spreading, like an undeniable piece of evidence. Caleb didn't die from an accident. That was certain. This was a murder, and these marks, these wounds, were a reminder of the brutality hidden in the shadows of this restaurant. There was no one else here but her and Caleb. No one witnessed it. But she knew Caleb's death wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a dark story she would never forget. Katie's footsteps echoed in the silence, and she realized that everything she once thought was normal had changed. She was standing on the threshold of a mystery no one could predict. Katie stood frozen, holding her phone, unable to collect her thoughts. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. The scene before her was so horrifying, it left her mind in chaos. A wave of fear and confusion washed over her, but she knew she had to call the police immediately. When they arrived, the officers quickly entered the restaurant and immediately focused on the kitchen. Upon seeing Caleb's body, the atmosphere in the room became heavy. Caleb lay face down, still holding the broken cup, and blood had spilled across the tile floor. The officers began examining the body, noticing that the wounds on Caleb's body were clearly not the result of an accident. They observed the bruises on his neck and arms, along with small cuts on his skin. These marks were unmistakable. They were signs of deliberate abuse and assault. The officers began gathering evidence, meticulously documenting every detail. In the tense silence, they realized that Caleb's death was not the end, but part of a dark mystery, a case that needed to be solved. The medical examiners were preparing to reach their final conclusion on Caleb's death. Everything pointed to a horrifying truth. After performing the autopsy, the doctors confirmed that Caleb had died from acute heart failure and severe blood loss. However, the most significant detail was not the usual wounds, but the clear signs of prolonged abuse. The bruises around Caleb's neck and the lacerations on his body suggested a targeted attack, not injuries from an accident. The doctors even noted that the wounds had been treated but not enough to save him. This confirmed that Caleb had endured abuse for a prolonged period before his tragic death. When the doctors returned their findings to the police, the atmosphere in their office grew even heavier. Everyone realized that this case was not simple. It contained many secrets that only time and the persistence of the investigators could uncover. Meanwhile, the police began reviewing the security cameras from the fast food restaurant, The Late Bite, where Caleb had worked. The footage was carefully examined, and the images from the security cameras revealed an alarming scene. Markus, the restaurant owner, appeared in the footage. He was seen throughout the night walking around the kitchen area, present during Caleb's late shift. No other employees were seen in the kitchen at that time. The footage clearly showed Markus near Caleb throughout the late shift, not just once, but several times, as if he were watching Caleb's every move. The officers scrutinized each frame, their eyes fixed on the smallest details, searching for signs of anything unusual. One specific clip caught their attention. For a brief moment, Markus stood too close to Caleb and made a strange gesture that no one had noticed before. Markus looked at Caleb with an indescribable expression, one that seemed to reminisce about some past relationship, but also with a possessive gaze. This footage further fueled suspicions about his involvement in Caleb's death. The police continued to monitor each small detail in the footage, and the truth slowly began to emerge. No one else appeared in the kitchen during that night shift except Markus and Caleb. This raised further doubts that Caleb's death couldn't have been an accident or a mere mishap. The wounds on his body and the absence of other witnesses suggested a deliberate attack, with the perpetrator likely being the only person present at the scene, Markus. A sense of unease filled the air as investigators realized they were dealing with a complex case, one where signs of abuse and prolonged mistreatment led to the death of a young man, and the perpetrator might be the very owner everyone believed they could trust. What happened that night would soon be revealed, but the biggest question remained unanswered. Was Markus truly the mastermind behind this murder, or was there something even darker behind Caleb's death? Markus, the owner of the fast food restaurant The Late Bite, was a middle-aged man with an approachable and friendly demeanor. When he first met Caleb, he was very impressed with the hard work and enthusiasm Caleb showed in his job. Markus always praised Caleb for his careful and professional work, continually giving him opportunities to showcase his talents. In their casual conversations, he promised to help Caleb advance and assured him that if he continued to work hard, he would have a bright future ahead. Markus's words made Caleb feel more confident about his position at the restaurant. He believed in Markus's promises, hoping that his dedication would be rewarded. However, after a short period of time, the relationship between Caleb and Markus began to change. What started as small requests, like working a few extra hours after his shift, gradually became more frequent and extended late into the night. Markus began asking Caleb to stay late without additional pay, claiming that the work needed to be completed. Caleb began to feel exhausted, but with the pressure from his boss and his need for the job, he couldn't refuse. He tried to convince himself that this was just a temporary difficult phase and that the situation would soon stabilize. However, what truly worried Caleb wasn't just the long hours. Whenever he tried to ask for time off or refused to work extra hours, Markus would threaten him with harsh words. "If you don't stay late, I won't pay you." His words felt like sharp daggers, and Caleb began to feel suffocated in the job he once loved. He started to realize that all the promises of advancement, all the friendly gestures from Markus, were nothing more than manipulation and control. Anxiety overwhelmed him, but the truth was that Caleb had no choice but to continue working under these conditions. This situation persisted, and each day Caleb could feel the change in Markus's behavior. The manipulation grew stronger, and Caleb couldn't find a way to escape his boss's control. He felt like he was slowly becoming a tool in Markus's hands, someone who could be discarded at any moment if he dared to resist. The constant sense of threat followed him, and despite trying his best at work, Caleb could no longer see a way out. On those late nights at work, he felt his freedom slipping away, like a puppet in the hands of someone full of power. The relationship between the two men grew more tense and dark, and Markus's shadow continuously loomed over Caleb, threatening him not only in the workplace but in his personal life as well. The signs of abuse, though not yet clear, began to take shape, and with each passing day, Caleb felt himself falling deeper into a spiraling situation beyond his control. Over the following nights, Markus's behavior became more and more obvious. From a friendly boss, he became a manipulator, forcing Caleb into situations that he couldn't refuse. At first, it was just requests to work late, but soon Markus began to take things further. He began to use his strength and power to coerce Caleb, forcing him to follow dark requests that he couldn't understand. Caleb felt fear gradually envelop him every night. He no longer saw a friendly boss, but only a threatening one. When he tried to refuse, Markus would threaten to fire him and withhold his wages if he didn't continue to do as he pleased. The threats cut like knives into his heart, making Caleb unable to stand up and fight back. He knew that if he refused, he would not only lose his job, but he could lose everything. Gradually, Caleb became tired and exhausted, not only from the long hours but also from Markus's mental manipulation. He felt like he was trapped in a vicious cycle where every night was a battle with himself. Not only did he lose his freedom, but he also felt Markus's abuse reaching every corner of his mind. Every night when Caleb looked into Markus' eyes, he no longer saw encouragement or hope, but only a dark shadow weighing down on his life. Feelings of guilt, shame, and fear filled Caleb's mind every morning when he woke up. He knew that what was happening could not be a coincidence, but the threats and pressure from Markus kept him from speaking up, from seeking help. He felt like a puppet, controlled by the threats of someone with power in his hands. The nights continued, and with each passing day, Caleb felt himself falling deeper into darkness, unable to escape Markus' control. Katie, Caleb's co-worker, was one of the key witnesses in this case. She worked with Caleb for a long time at the fast food restaurant The Late Bite, and was the last person to have contact with him before his death. During the days they worked together, Katie noticed a marked change in Caleb's mood and behavior. He became anxious, tired, and had little energy to maintain his job. Katie's testimony showed that Caleb was not only overworked, but also faced with a fear that he could not share with anyone. Katie recalled that in an informal conversation one evening, Caleb confided to her that he felt unable to refuse any request from Markus. He admitted that he was afraid of losing his job and not being paid if he did not continue to follow his boss's requests. This made Katie extremely worried because she realized that Caleb was not only being physically manipulated, but also mentally threatened and coerced. Katie said that in recent days, Caleb had been constantly stressed and tired. He was no longer smiling and optimistic like before. Instead, he had anxious eyes and strange silence. Caleb could not share many details, but Katie clearly realized that something was happening that made him live in fear. She remembered one time Caleb said, "I can't stop, Katie. If I stop, I will lose everything. I need this job, but I can't take it anymore." These words rang in Katie's head like a warning, but she could do nothing more than witness Caleb's change without being able to help. When the case was investigated, the police collected a series of important evidence from Caleb's phone, including messages sent before his death. These messages not only revealed a tense relationship between Caleb and Markus, but also demonstrated that he had endured constant threats from his boss. In one message to a close friend, Caleb wrote, "Markus told me to work tonight, even though I don't want to. If I don't, he won't pay me. I can't lose this job. I don't know what to do." Other messages revealed that Caleb was not only asked to work late, but was also threatened with being fired if he didn't comply. Another message recorded Caleb saying that he felt forced to work nights and sometimes felt like he had no autonomy. "I feel trapped, like I can't get out of this. I can't say no to Markus because he always finds a way to scare me," Caleb wrote in a message to another friend. In addition to the messages, police also found several notes that Caleb had written in his diary, in which he recorded his pent-up emotions and thoughts during his time working with Markus. These notes showed that Caleb was not only physically manipulated, but also under severe psychological pressure. He wrote that he felt like he was living in a nightmare that he could not escape no matter how hard he tried. Police continued to examine the surveillance camera system of the fast food restaurant The Late Bite. A video from a security camera in the kitchen area captured important footage from the night before Caleb died. The footage showed Markus and Caleb in the kitchen all night, and no one else was in the area. The images in this video showed a clear tension between the two. At first, Caleb tried to stay away from Markus, staring at the floor and avoiding the boss's eyes. These actions were clear signs of anxiety and stress, but the most suspicious thing appeared around 2 a.m. when Markus moved closer to Caleb and acted unusually. In the video, Markus forced Caleb to stand near the corner of the kitchen, where there were no surveillance cameras. Although there was no clear footage of the act of rape, Markus' gestures and Caleb's attitude showed a clear discomfort. Caleb stands motionless, his eyes not looking directly at Markus, and his hands shaking as he tries to retreat from the area. The next shot shows Markus pulling Caleb closer to the desk, where no one else is watching. These images show Caleb struggling, but Markus firmly holds him back. Caleb continues to evade, but is still unable to escape Markus's coercion. It is clear to the police that in these moments, Caleb is being forced into a situation he has no control over, and the tension in their actions is undeniable. The video shows Markus pulling Caleb closer and making clear coercive moves. Although there are no direct images of the coercion from Caleb's demeanor, Markus' actions, and the secluded space in the kitchen, the police begin to realize that this is an act of sexual coercion. Caleb's movements, not just anxious but also hasty, made it clear that Caleb was in a dangerous situation, unable to free himself. About 30 minutes later, another video shows Markus continuing to hold Caleb near the kitchen area, with the door closed, separating them from anyone who might witness it. During this time, no one else is in the area. Caleb no longer tries to escape, and Markus's actions become more forceful, suggesting that he is unable to resist. This footage further supports the suspicion of rape that the police are investigating. At approximately 3 a.m., Markus walks out of the kitchen area, leaving Caleb standing alone. This video shows Caleb standing there motionless, his face showing no emotion other than fear and panic. The police found Caleb powerless to resist, and when Markus left, he stood there quietly, in a cold space, with a pale yellow light shining on the ground. This was the decisive moment. Caleb could not bear it any longer and collapsed, but Markus did not realize the profound damage he had caused. At around 4 a.m., Markus returned to the kitchen and found Caleb lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police believe that Markus realized that he had caused Caleb's death due to severe injuries and acute heart failure, along with blood loss from the injuries from the rape. But instead of calling an ambulance, Markus quickly set up a fake scene. He dragged Caleb to another location in the kitchen, tried to fake the injury, and placed a broken cup near his hand to create the impression of a work accident. The police could not ignore the sudden change in Markus' actions. Instead of panicking, he calmly moved Caleb and recreated the scene, an act that showed his calculation in covering up the crime. Surveillance video captured this moment, proving that Markus was not only a witness to Caleb's death, but also directly caused it, and then deliberately covered up his crime. With surveillance video, text messages from Caleb's phone, and Katie's testimony, the police had enough evidence to prove that Caleb's death was not an accident. It was the result of an act of sexual coercion and manipulation carried out by Markus himself. The police, after a tense and detailed investigation, decided to arrest Markus, the owner of the fast food restaurant, The Late Bite. The arrest took place early in the morning, when Markus was preparing for a normal working day. When arrested, Markus did not appear to panic. On the contrary, he tried to remain calm and insisted that all his actions towards Caleb were consensual, that they had a normal and consensual relationship. Markus denied all accusations of rape and claimed that Caleb's death was an unfortunate accident. However, Markus's statements could not obscure the clear evidence collected by the police. Surveillance camera footage, text messages denouncing Markus' threats, along with the marks of injury on Caleb's body, completely negated his justification. Markus could not explain the obvious strain on his relationship with Caleb, nor the sudden change in Caleb's demeanor, who had been a dedicated employee but had gradually become tired and anxious. Physical evidence, such as injuries consistent with sexual assault and signs of acute heart failure, revealed the truth. When pressed with irrefutable evidence, Markus fell silent, no longer defending his actions. The police continued to take further legal action, and Markus was taken to the police station with a worried face, knowing that a life of freedom was about to end. After his arrest, Markus faced serious charges of murder and sexual abuse. The overwhelming evidence from Katie's testimony to the video footage from the restaurant kitchen exposed Markus's terrifying actions towards Caleb. The trial began in a tense atmosphere. Caleb's parents, sitting in the front row, were sad but determined. They had lost their beloved son, but now they were fighting for justice, not only for Caleb, but for the thousands of other workers who may be suffering in the dark. Throughout the trial, witnesses and evidence were presented one by one. Katie, a co-worker, testified about Caleb's days of fear, constantly threatened by Markus. Text messages from Caleb's phone, in which he expressed his anxiety about losing his job and not being paid if he refused to work overtime, shed light on Markus's manipulative motives. The police also showed surveillance video, which showed the strained relationship between the two and the rape that occurred on the night before Caleb's death. While Markus' defense attorneys argued that Caleb's death was an accident, the evidence of Markus's manipulation and abuse was undeniable. Although Markus continued to deny the charges, the trial concluded that he was responsible for Caleb's death. After hours of tension and final arguments from the defense attorney, the court found Markus guilty of murder and sexual abuse. After a long and tense trial, Markus was convicted of murder and sexual abuse. The court sentenced Markus to life in prison without parole, along with 25 years for the sexual abuse charge. The evidence of his manipulation and coercion was enough to convince the court to convict Markus. The verdict was delivered, but even though justice had been served, the pain of Caleb's family's loss was not assuaged. Having lost their only child, the emptiness that Caleb left behind still lingers in every moment, and nothing can fill it. However, the trial also brought a little relief, that what Caleb had endured all this time was finally exposed. They could not forget the long nights Caleb had to face fear, threats, and both physical and mental pain. However, Caleb's family still believed that the trial was not just a personal battle, but also a great message to the vulnerable workers in society who may be suffering without daring to speak up. Caleb's story is not only a lesson for his family, but also a warning to those who live in fear in a workplace where manipulation and abuse can go unnoticed. Despite the loss of their beloved son, Caleb's family is determined not to let his story be forgotten. They hope that this truth will help raise awareness of workplace abuse and create a safer environment for other workers.